Okay, so for this next video lecture, so we will continue with the entities risk assessment process as the second element for the system of internal control. Okay, so the entities risk assessment process, this is considered to be iterative process, meaning it's a routinary process for identifying and analyzing risk so that the entity will achieve its objective. Okay, or objectives, and this will form the basis for how management or those charged with governance determine the risk to be managed. So this is considered to be iterative or routinary process because risks are inevitable, and risk will give negative impact on the operations, business, and even financial reporting of the entity. That's why they have to, from time to time, assess the or any potential risk that may exist, and so they will know how to manage them properly to address and minimize its negative impacts. So for financial reporting purposes, the risk assessment process will include how the management will identify the business risks that are related or relevant to the financial reporting objectives, estimates their significance, and assess the likelihood of their occurrence, as well as decide upon the actions on how to manage or minimize them. Okay, so business risk, as we all know, will affect as well the quality of financial reporting, okay, the entity is making. So that's why, aside from the general risk assessment, they should also try to focus on the risk that may exist in the financial reporting, because in this case, financial reporting is used as a tool for decision making. That's why they have to make sure that somehow the risk associated with it will be minimized. So here, to illustrate, the company must recognize that risk can arise or change because of the following instances. So these are the instances or circumstances that gives rise to risks. Okay, the first is changes in operating environment. Okay, and related to that as well is the changes in regulatory requirements. Okay, so basically, when we say change, there is something new. Okay, new requirements that needs to be complied in terms of operating environment. There may be new machineries and equipment that needs to be acquired. Okay, so therefore additional capital are necessary. So the question here is that new or the changes, okay, that brought about by this change in environment, operating environment, or regulatory requirements are able to be complied by the entity or not, or what are its impact on its business activities in its financial reporting. Okay, so meaning there are risks that comes along with these changes. Okay, another instance is for the new personnel. So when there is a new personnel that will come in the entity, so they might have different focus or understanding about the internal control. That's why a stringent recruitment selection process should be implemented, and so the most qualified person in the post will be hired, and at the same time they will consider the person's attitudes and ethical behavior and make sure that it aligns with their organizational objectives. Okay, another instance is when there is a new or revamped information systems. So basically, when talking about information system, so technology is always associated with it. So basically, when talking about technology in information systems, so there might be possibilities of eradicating audit trails because of its automation. Okay, and so risks are uh, inevitable. Okay, so therefore the established internal controls cannot compensate, okay, with these new things that comes in the information system of the entity. So that's why we've mentioned before that it's important that internal controls should be updated or added for those new facilities or technology that is also implemented or employed, okay, by the entity. Okay, another instance is rapid growth or expansion. So meaning here, for expansion, there would be additional people, additional requirements, additional capital or investment. So, meaning there are still risks that may arise, and the existing internal control for the present operation may not cope up also with the additional segment or division. So, internal control should be added to help in controlling these expanded activities, okay, or operations. Another is new technology. So, this is the same as what we have discussed under the information system. Okay, of course, technologies may change the risk, especially that are associated to internal control, okay, as discussed. Okay, another instance is the new business models, products, or activities. So this one is the same with that of the expansion, because here the entity will enter into business areas or transactions in which they may have little experience with or knowledge. So here, they are still in the process of understanding this new product, model, or activity, and therefore, internal controls that are presently existing cannot be implemented, okay, with such new model, product, or activities. So, therefore, there is risk, okay, and there is actually a risk which cannot be assessed or managed because there is no internal control that fits with the new activities. Okay, another is in the case of corporate restructuring. So, in the case of a corporate restructuring, normally this exists when there is a deficit, okay, in the retained earnings part of the entity's stockholders' equity account. In this case, restructuring can be made by issuing additional shares or bonds, or even acquiring additional long-term liability to eliminate the deficit. Another is they could also change the management, terminate some of their staff, okay, to minimize the cost and expenses, again to reduce the deficit. Okay, so in this case, since there are changes, so risk is also associated with it. Okay, another is expanded foreign operations. So this is again the same with that of the expansion. Okay, however, in this case, this is a different and unique case where the entity will enter into foreign currency transactions, which of course we all know that foreign currency has or is considered to be highly volatile type of a transaction because of the changes in the rates. Okay, so risk therefore is associated with these types of transactions. Okay, another is the new accounting pronouncements or new or additional or revised standards. Okay, so adopting of these new accounting principles or changing the policies may affect the risk also, especially in the preparation of their financial statements. Okay, because the risk with it will be if the management is able to comply with the requirements or to follow these new standards, or if they will follow it or implement it, it may result into misstatements of their FS. So they have to justify if they don't follow such changes and so on. Okay, so another is the use of IT. Okay, so of course we have mentioned a lot of risk associated with IT, okay, information technology. So it relates to risk in maintaining the integrity of the data processing. Okay, because in this case, it will eliminate some audit trail because of its automation. Okay, another is risk to the entity business strategy that arise if the entity's IT strategy does not effectively support its strategy. So meaning the technology does not fit with the strategy that the entity wants to implement. Okay, that will be a problem and a cost related problem as well. Okay, and changes in IT environment or turnover of IT personnel, because in this case the system might be hacked, okay, and therefore data privacy is of the entity is in danger. Okay, so that is very important consideration that the entity should consider in utilizing this type of technologies. Okay, so the entity's risk assessment process forms the basis on how management, of course, will determine the risk to be managed, because in their risk assessment, they will determine that the risk that exists, so therefore they will know how to manage it because they have already identified it. Okay, if that process is appropriate to the circumstances, then it will assist the auditor also in identifying the risk of material misstatement. So this is how important risk assessment procedure is in an internal control system. It not only benefit the entity but also the auditor later on. Okay, so that is for the entity's risk assessment process.